Greetings and welcome to the University of Minnesota Alumni Association's webinar series. My name is John Ruzek. I'm the Vice President of Engagement for the Alumni Association, and I'm so glad that all of you have joined us today. We had a really great number of registrants for today's webinar, and so again, very happy that you've taken time out of your day, wherever you are, to join us. Today's webinar will be a conversation about how things like gratitude, mindfulness, and growth mindset can help you develop positivity as a skill that will ultimately lead to more well-being and happiness. But before we jump into today's presentation, just a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is part of an ongoing free series being offered by the Alumni Association, where we have conversations with experts about career, life, and learning topics. Initiatives like the webinar series are made possible in part by our Alumni Association members. So if you are a member, thank you so much. And because of our members, we can create powerful opportunities and ignite success for current students and more than 485,000 alumni around the world. And if you're interested in learning more about the Alumni Association and supporting our work, visit umnalumni.org/membership. And also thank you to our partner and webinar supporting sponsor, Liberty Mutual Insurance. We do have one more webinar coming up actually next week, and it's a unique faculty-led webinar talking about memory, trauma, and human rights at the crossroads of art and science. And this is a collaboration of 3 faculty being brought together by the College of Liberal Arts Interdisciplinary Collaborative Workshop, the Institute of Advanced Study, and the Imagine Fund. And if you'd like to sign up, just visit us at umnalumni.org/virtual. Just some very quick housekeeping items on the GoToWebinar technology. You have joined the presentation listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you'd prefer to listen over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane of your GoToWebinar panel and dial-in information will be displayed. And if you're having audio difficulties while listening via your computer, you might want to consider shutting down background applications that are running or connect to a hard signal versus Wi-Fi. Our presenter today has uploaded a PDF document that she is sharing with attendees today. And you can see that in the handouts pane on your control panel. Your default web browser will automatically launch and open a blank page, and the handout will start downloading. I do realize that sometimes, depending on the computer, there can be issues with that. So we will also send out the handout in the email that we'll do after the webinar that has the recording of the webinar, because the webinar is being recorded today. And if you have a question, you can submit them at any time. Just go to the questions section on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll monitor them along the way. So please feel free to submit anything. And now it's my absolute pleasure to introduce today's featured speaker, Whitney Moore. Whitney has been a career counselor in the College of Science and Engineering Career Center at the University of Minnesota since the fall of 2011. Her passion lies in living a life of positivity and inspiring people to pursue their best self, particularly while navigating career and leadership development. In addition to her work at the U of M, Whitney is a past president of the Minnesota College and University Career Services Association and holds degrees from Gustavus Adolphus College and Minnesota State University Mankato. Away from campus, Whitney is motivated by running with her dog, competing in triathlons, eating baked goods, I'm getting hungry already, and exploring Minnesota with her husband. As an utter positivist, you can also find her musings on living with positivity on Instagram at the Positivist Explorer. And we'll also have some of that information in her slide deck later. So welcome, Whitney Moore.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. I'm really excited to talk about how we can leverage positivity for more fulfillment and meaning in our daily lives. But I want to start with this. I do understand that life in general and myths about the concept of positivity can get in the way of feeling like positivity is for you, or that it's even something that's possible. So I'd like to start by sharing an example of a time in my life where I had the same questions and struggles that you may be having or have gone through in the past. So although I've been a pretty positive person most of my life, this experience is actually the experience that led me to grow in my own understanding of the essential nature of positive thinking in general. So let's start by kind of getting on the same page about maybe some of the barriers as I talk about my story. So 6 years ago, I was faced with a choice. I didn't know I had a choice or recognize the choice that I was making at the time, but choice is a very important part of this story. 2 years after I started my job here at the university, from August 2013 to August 2014, everyone that was in my small office when I first started left for new opportunities. And there were a variety of reasons that people left, but like all times of change, we went through a lot of ambiguity, just challenging experiences in general, confusion. I had a temporary boss. I moved offices for a few months. Our leadership, took some time to determine a new direction for the office, and our team was functioning in different ways. And so in a lot of ways, this all sucked. It sucks when you feel like you don't have clarity or plans are being kept from you, or you don't have a voice in the changes that are being placed upon you. So the choice I've come to realize I had was how I chose to interpret and respond to these changes. So I had a choice to jump on what I call the toxicity bandwagon of frustration, or take ownership of my response. So let's explore these options a little bit. Let's consider that I jumped on that first option, the toxicity bandwagon of frustration, that could have kept me from experiencing these changes more productively. So let's use that kind of questions or comments box, and based on your experiences, take a few moments to share some of the things that you've faced as barriers or beliefs that you feel have maybe made thinking positively or experiencing situations positively difficult. So we'll give you a little bit of time just to plug those into the comments box, and I'll read some of them off as they come through.
Mm-hmm. So feel free in the questions pane on the GoToWebinar panel to type in any comments, and we'll generically just kind of talk about some of the comments coming in.
Yeah, so I'm seeing some specific situations come through, and that's great. I'm glad that you're starting to think about those, because I'll encourage you to come back to that later. But right now I would maybe focus more on kind of broader views or perspectives, ways of thinking, those sorts of things that are maybe have maybe been barriers rather than such specific situations. Because today I hope to help us think about how we can address those situations. Yeah, so I'm seeing some relationships, things related to anxiety or feelings of anxiety, feeling unqualified, maybe some behaviors that we're seeing from other people, learning to say no, different things that may be demanding of our time. Yeah, so a lot of great and really, legitimate, legitimate experiences or perspectives or things, barriers that are maybe coming through. Yeah, maybe you're feeling like the environment isn't quite suitable. Yeah, and so much of what you're saying are things that I personally can relate to. So as our responses are coming through, and just as I've kind of reflected on my own experiences with things that have happened that could be negative, I've kind of narrowed it down to there being internal barriers that we may be facing, and then also some perceptions of positivity. So those kind of being the two categories, if you will, or two kind of recurring themes that maybe can keep us from positivity. So in terms of internal barriers, I often find that they kind of fall into these three different categories. So The first thing may be our expectations of how we think about or how we think things should be, excuse me, or perceptions of what is happening in a situation. Our sense of control and belief or understanding of our role in a situation, and the habits that we maybe have that perpetuate a cycle of self-talk about the situation that may or may not be true. So if we kind of go back to my situation, the choice I could have made in my story if I jumped on that toxic negativity bandwagon was to have the expectation that I should be involved in all aspects of the changes, or the perception that I was being excluded from the process, like intentionally, that I had no control over how I was being allowed to do my work. I could have chosen to then gossip and continually vent with coworkers about our hardships, and to play the angst that I felt about the situation and how terrible it was over and over in my head. So, you know, connecting to that self-talk. And I'll just note quickly that I did almost label this as negative self-talk here, but as I will talk about in a minute, I don't actually think negativity is the opposite of positivity. So that's why you're not seeing that there. And I just want to call that out because I feel like negative self-talk is a very commonly known phrase. And so I hope to kind of address later on why I didn't label it necessarily as negative self-talk. So I feel like those, like I said, are kind of more the internal thought processes, or things that may be kind of going on internally that may keep us from positivity. In terms of perceptions, then. There are also a lot of perceptions that we may have about the idea of positivity that make it difficult to believe that we are capable of seeing things differently. So terms and phrases like you see here are often what come to mind for people when they think of positivity. It's ideas like those on this list that can leave an impression that positivity doesn't have a place in the real world, or that it's only for those with certain personality types or life experiences. And I recognize that the ideas on this list are often associated with positivity for a reason. It's because it's not uncommon for people to try to project positivity in ways that are inauthentic or attempt to negate legitimate human experience. I found that we commonly oversimplify positivity to be a framework for life that genuinely isn't realistic. So phrases like those, if we look at this chart, phrases like those on the right column are examples of ways that positivity can be inauthentic or oversimplified. The idea of rainbows and sunshine doesn't work for most people, and not even me a lot of the time. Phrases like those on the right just aren't helpful. So ideas like just think positive or positive vibes only ignore the fact that bad things happen and that feelings of anger, frustration, and sadness are really part of our full range of human emotion and human experience, and that we need to allow ourselves the space to have those feelings and emotions. We can't just say, don't be mad, don't be angry, just be happy, because it doesn't work that way. Which is exactly why I don't believe that negativity is the opposite of positivity, like I mentioned earlier. The truth is we need that yin and yang of positive and negative to be fully human, to experience the full range of human emotion, to appreciate what we have. I mean, look at the winter we just had in Minnesota. We needed that to really find the joy in summer and to be excited about summer that's coming. So if we never hear no, if we never have those things, then we don't know how meaningful the positive things can be. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, feeling negative or angry or, things like that often indicate things that we really care about too. So caring, that's a good thing. So those feelings of negativity don't necessarily mean a bad thing. So that's why I actually believe that apathy is the opposite of positivity. So the real bad thing is never feeling emotion for anything, never caring, or seeing tragedy or something that really gets to you and having no reaction to it. So this leads me to my working definition of positivity. So I view positivity as a mindset we can leverage to proactively respond to life's events for greater life satisfaction. And the only way to adopt this mindset is by recognizing that positivity is a choice, that we have to do our best to make every day and in every situation. And in making that choice, we have to take intentional action in our lives in new ways to walk what we talk. And those consistent actions over time then become a practice for the way that we approach life. And just like anything with practice, we can develop positivity to be a skill then that comes naturally or more easily in our kind of day-to-day life experiences. When we begin to talk about it in this way, we begin to understand how positivity or negativity are not mindsets that we are destined for, or are reserved for those certain personality types or life experiences that maybe we thought they were. I also want to mention how I view positivity and optimism differently, since they are often intertwined and used interchangeably. So I feel like it's kind of what comes first, the chicken or the egg situation. I view positivity as a proactive mindset that allows me to have the optimism to believe I can handle what comes my way. So positivity is handling the day-to-day of life. Optimism is hope for the future. Positivity provides optimism that I can handle those future situations. So really, positivity is a strategy, and optimism isn't necessarily a strategy. All right, so with this new way of thinking about positivity in mind, let's go back to my story from the start of the talk and explore how positivity maybe could have been implemented. So remember, I had this choice between the toxicity bandwagon of frustration or taking ownership of my response to the changes that were happening. And in that first choice, I could have had unnecessary, unrealistic expectations about my involvement in the changes, the perception that I was being excluded. I could have believed that I had no choice. I could have gossiped about the hardships, allowed myself to kind of internally perpetuate ineffective self-talk. So now in applying positivity, again, I'd encourage you to use that comments box and think through this a little bit. What sort of questions or thoughts would have been a better choice for me to help navigate this situation? And like I said, kind of use the comments box there to offer your ideas about maybe what it would have been. Again, some good questions to maybe ask myself, some different perspectives that I could have thought about in this situation. So yeah, great things already coming through. What are the areas that you have control over? How can I make this transition easier? How can I be a good team player? Choose to look for opportunities to grow. Yeah, what can we do as a team? What kind of opportunities might this open up? Who else can I talk to about the problems that I see? Is it an advancement opportunity? Realize the other ways that difficult could be. What's helped me be successful in the past, given the situation? How can you look for new challenges or opportunities? Yeah, absolutely. You're getting it. This is great. What unique skills can I contribute to this situation? Yeah, these are fantastic. And they really resonate. I think the questions that I've come to learn are more helpful, are more productive. And you've already said a lot of these ones that I've got on this slide. How can I make the most of this? What can I learn? How can I move forward productively? What I have control over? Who do I want to become as a result of this? I think those are all great. And if we take this, the other situations and those kind of unhelpful phrases that we saw earlier, you're not seeing things come up like, don't worry, I'm sure it'll get better, smile, everything will be okay. Because those weren't really, focusing on solutions. They were just those sorts of phrases would have just tried to kind of divert the situation and not necessarily like actually address it. So by now you may have figured out that I did, for the most part, choose to be positive and choose that option in this situation. But I mean, I'm definitely not going to deny that there were times that I let toxicity get to me. Over time, I realized that when I did make those choices that were more toxic, I felt really crappy, and it just wasn't a sustainable life. So over the course of all the change, though, friends and colleagues who are aware of our situation in the office would ask me how things were going and commented on how positive I was staying staying through it all. But it probably wasn't until about a year and a half into everything that I began to really understand what I was doing that helped me stay positive during a time that was definitely had its frustrations. So I began to see kind of the important role that choosing patience and openness, essentially a more effective and productive response, played in helping me maintain my positivity for sure, but also avoid drama, and ultimately be seen and utilized as a leader despite my status as a younger professional, which I think was definitely reflected in a lot of the questions that you put up there earlier. And it also just really helped me stay grounded in my own values and priorities rather than get caught up in all of the muck. So as we continue today, hopefully I've already accomplished these first two things, provided a new definition for positivity, and shared, my own kind of positivity story and what's kind of gotten me here to today. So as we move forward, what I hope to do is then now kind of demonstrate and back up that this is something that everybody is capable of doing, and also hopefully leave you with a method and some even simple day-to-day strategies to help you leverage positivity. Before we move on to that, though, I do want to acknowledge that I understand there is a lot of privilege in this conversation, when we're talking about this core tenet of choice, especially. So I just want to be clear that I do not intend to suggest that people who are in need or in danger, who are being oppressed, just need to be more positive if they want to solve or overcome the real, very real challenges they are facing. I do think there are applications for positivity in those situations, but that's definitely, not the purpose today. The conversation we're having today is intended to discuss an approach for processing everyday life and kind of handling day-to-day challenges and difficulties when those basic needs are met. With that said, I'd like to transition to some of the most interesting aspects of leveraging positivity I have found in my research to better understand how this concept is something that everyone is capable of integrating. I strongly believe that to adopt a new mindset, we first have to be willing to consider another option for interpreting life. Even if we're not there yet or believing it or seeing it, we have to first just believe or be willing to consider that there may be another option, and we have to be open to understanding how that other option may be possible, so that we can make that change. So to do that, let's back it all up with some science. Even though I'm not a scientist, I have found a lot of things that I've learned over the last few years just to be really interesting. So first, I'd just like to start with talking a little bit about some basic kind of brain functions. So there's a few kind of concepts I think are helpful to understand. So first of all, it's helpful to understand that one of the kind of basic ways that our brain functions and the kind of influences how we process things are called neural pathways. So these are shortcuts and efficiencies that our brain has for processing the world. So kind of a default setting, because our brain wants to take the easiest route to process things so it can do it as quickly as possible. But many times we may be more likely to kind of have a negative reaction to something is because of that, what a lot of us probably know of is that human fight or flight syndrome, that really we used to evolutionarily need for survival, but now we don't need it as much or really need it in the same ways. But it's that having this fight or flight syndrome that actually then causes us to have a negativity bias. So we're kind of set up to pay more attention to negative events or characteristics, far more than positive experiences or emotions, because they don't pose a threat to us. So because of this negativity bias, we're more likely to kind of ruminate on things that went wrong or were stressful more than happy times or happy memories. This negativity bias causes us to hold on to things that are more troubling and to forget about those happy experiences more quickly. Also, change then is kind of a pain in the brain. So processing changes or a new way of doing things requires us to use part of the brain that just takes more energy. So as we start to try and formulate these like new neural pathways to see things in a different way, it definitely takes more effort. And so that's one thing I'll just say is if you're starting to think about how much work it may be, how much energy it may be to adopt some of these new perspectives, you're right, it will be literally kind of a pain in the brain. The other thing that I have learned about that I find super interesting are a part of our brains called mirror neurons. And so these mirror neurons are kind of the thing that at a very basic level cause us to smile or laugh or yawn when we see other people doing so. But they're also kind of the part of the brain that ultimately is what causes negativity to spread like secondhand smoke. So while it's really easy to consider positivity as an individual choice, which I think it is kind of the main way we've been talking about it so far. I think it's also really important to understand that the mindsets, actions, and behaviors that we have, even if we think of them as individual things, really do affect those around us, whether we're directing them at other people or not, because of these mirror neurons. So to me, this is actually one of the biggest reasons I'm so passionate about leveraging positivity in my own life, is so that I can model for others how to do the same, whether I'm talking about it with them or not. So it's just kind of with the hope that they'll pick it up through osmosis. So we just start to think about positivity not necessarily just in the way that we want to incorporate it into our own lives, but also how we want it to spread throughout the communities or teams that we're a part of. I think it also starts to help us see how it's really bigger than just ourselves. And this mirror neuron research specifically comes out of some work that Sean Achor has been doing in the realm of positive psychology, which is the study of strengths that enable individuals and communities to thrive, according to the Positive Psychology Center. And it was founded by Martin Seligman in the late 90s. After studying people from all walks of life, income levels, living conditions, all those sorts of things, Sean Achor in his work has found that the environment people live in actually has very little to do with their levels of positivity or levels of happiness. So actually only 10% of our long-term levels of happiness can be predicted by our external world, but 90% of our levels of happiness are predicted by how we process the world. So this means we really need to start moving beyond the belief that I cannot feel happy right now because of some external reason. His research has shown that adopting some very simple, positive, positive and happiness habits can change even someone who was born with a predisposition for negativity to become predisposed to be more happy and be more positive. They've done this with 80-year-old men who their whole lives have lived with negativity, and they adopt one 2-minute activity that they do every day for 21 days, and they've seen these results. So it's really astounding. They've also found that negative people tend to be at the bottom level of their potential, that positivity increases intelligence levels, meaning ideas like ignorance is bliss doesn't necessarily hold up. Positive people tend to also be more willing to take risks, which ultimately leads to more success, whereas negative people may tend to be more reluctant to take risks and view things that go well as flukes rather than things that they were capable of doing. So in this way, positive and negative people both kind of create self-fulfilling prophecies. The other research I found so interesting focuses actually more so on the anatomy of our brain, and stems from a real life experience from someone named Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. So in 1996, over the course of 4 hours, Jill had a stroke, which it really is really interesting as a neuroanatomist, rather than seeking help or calling for help when she realized she was starting to have a stroke. She just stayed home and kind of let herself have this stroke and observe what was happening because she wanted to learn from the experience. And ultimately she did end up losing functioning of her left hemisphere, so which is basically the kind of linear, methodical thinking part of the brain, kind of views the past and the future to interpret the present moment. It kind of thinks more in language. It's that brain chatter that says I am. But she retained functioning of her right hemisphere, which is much more in the present moment, thinks in pictures, is kind of the thing that connects us to our surroundings and other people. So this means that she had to relearn a self, essentially, as she began to gain re-functioning of her left hemisphere. And what she really describes was so interesting is she realized she had a choice to pick up the baggage that she had, this kind of emotional baggage she had lost. So she could pick it back up. She could not pick it up, or she could create new baggage. And she, in an interview I watched, she's like, "What an opportunity!" Like, I just love how she viewed this. So what she explains though is that our thoughts are really just created by a tiny group of cells about the size of a peanut in our left hemisphere, designed to tell stories so that we feel safe in the external world. So these stories are really just meant to kind of categorize things and label things based on actually that negativity bias that we have. And these stories are not necessarily always true. So Dr. Bolte Taylor expresses that you aren't your thoughts, and that anyone can control the thoughts that we're having by choosing to focus their mind on what they want. So she really believes that we need to kind of start taking responsibility for the thoughts that we allow ourselves to have, to pay attention to what we are thinking, and then decide if those are thoughts decide if those thoughts are creating the kind of life that we want to have. And she says, if not, then change your thoughts. When you don't think it anymore, it doesn't exist. So to make sure that you are really only allowing yourself to run the circuitry, run the neural pathways that bring you peace, is the way that she describes it. So now I definitely don't want all of us to go through a stroke to develop the skill. So I'm excited to talk about a process that I like to use that I think allows us to kind of fully work through situations and experiences that you may typically, or may have that potential to be perceived negatively, so that we can respond in a more positive way. So as we dive into this process, what I'm going to encourage you to do is think about a situation maybe from the past that you wish you would have approached more positively, or maybe something that you're going through right now that you would like to ensure that you're approaching more positively. So this could be a small moment, like maybe you got cut off in traffic this morning, or last week when we got the April snowstorm. So kind of that everyday annoyance. Or an everyday annoyance, even dealing with a difficult neighbor, or it could be a big experience, maybe where you faced hardship, like losing a job, or something like that that's affecting you on a larger scale. So I've creatively coined my method as 3 P's for positivity. So to me, it's a practice and a process kind of for your whole life that I think can be used to help us not only in this situation, but also the more we use it can help us proactively be prepared to better handle situations before they even arise too. So I'll also say it's a spectrum and a process that you may go back and forth through. It's not necessarily linear either. So the first thing I think we need to do is really allow ourselves space to address the feelings and emotions that we're having in a situation. So I think taking pause is really important. So taking pause, it may mean, like those examples I gave earlier, it may be a split second thing where you got cut off in traffic and you just need to take a moment to, okay, I got cut off, like that's frustrating. Or for something bigger, it may be something that takes days or weeks or months even to go through. But either way, it's important to pause so that you can avoid having a reaction that's not necessarily representative of the life that you want to live. So I think there are kind of 3 commitments that are essential to make kind of to yourself during this time. So first, I think you need to offer yourself grace. I think you really need to remember that feeling frustrated, feeling hate, feeling anger, sadness, defeat, those aren't necessarily bad things, because that may mean that you really care about something. So avoid, judging how you're feeling, but also avoid judging the actions or the things that other people did in a situation, as well. The reality is that everyone, positive people included, have negative thoughts. It's just maybe how they let those thoughts control them, as Dr. Bolte Taylor preached. The second thing is just to be honest with yourself. You need to speak your truth. You have to allow yourself and others to be human in order to effectively respond to life. And that, there is definitely an element of mindfulness that's required to sit with these emotions and feelings. Then we also need to be patient. The only way to really move beyond those negative feelings is to allow them to be named, felt, acknowledged. Otherwise, they're just going to come out in some other way. They're going to come out some way, and taking this pause, I think, really allows us to have more control over how they come out and what we do with them. But we definitely don't want to get stuck here. We do want to take our time with it, but we don't want to get stuck here. It's important that we move forward to the next phase so that we can, get more to a place of action. So once you've given yourself the space to look inward, you can start to move to a place of processing what to make of those emotions in the situation that transpired. So this kind of requires us to begin to look outside of ourselves a little bit more objectively. So here we're going to loop back to those barriers that we talked about at the very beginning, where you may feel lack of control. You maybe need to check in with your expectations and perceptions, that self-talk. So check in with our, interpretation of the situation. Remember from positive psychology that it's shown that 90% of our happiness is determined by how we interpret situations. These are also things that we can be, like I said earlier, be proactive about when entering a new experience. So if we go into the experience kind of having the right sense of control or expectation about what's going to happen, then we can hopefully avoid some self-inflicted negativity on the front end. Most of the barriers to living with positivity can stem from the way our brains are interpreting or responding to situations. So I'm definitely not saying that the experiences you may be having aren't real or aren't bad, but I do think that we can learn to move through them in a healthier, more productive, more effective way while we're experiencing them. Also, things like looking for evidence that your thoughts are true, or look for facts that the situation, more kind of facts and situations to help us evaluate it. And, remember that just because you think something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So I'm not saying it's not true, but it's just important to consider kind of both options. So as we check in with these barriers, we need to keep a few things in mind. So one, we need to believe in our ability to have a choice. Then we also need to convey empathy and self-awareness. Not only, kind of conveying self-empathy, emotional intelligence, and self-awareness can help us see, what may be causing our emotions, and may also help us have a better understanding of the behaviors of other people and where they may be coming from. And this can really help prevent us from kind of getting wrapped up in ourselves. Consider why you care about this. if you actually do care about it. Do you actually care about this situation? Or are you feeling like you should because of things that other people are doing or saying, or how news or media, for instance, maybe conveying the situation? And think about, how does this actually affect me? Like, is this actually affecting me, or is it not? And then begin to focus more on solutions. So, think about, what would you say to a friend who had this problem? Or, sometimes I think that really positivity isn't necessarily, again, about those rainbows and sunshine, but it may just be, how can I be more productive here? How can I be more efficient or more effective here? Maybe I need to understand what the no here actually, the no I'm getting actually means, and maybe why I shouldn't be taking it personally. Maybe consider, what is your goal? Focus on a goal that you have control over the factors of. So, if you want everyone to agree with you, you don't necessarily have control over that, but you do have control over trying to develop good relationships. So kind of what action are necessary may or may not be required of you. So once you've given yourself some time to really process it, hopefully from a little bit more of an objective perspective, then ultimately we need to get to a place where we're taking action, and kind of choosing how we want to respond, who we want to become as a result of it. I think it's important to note that oftentimes the closure we seek on an experience is just something that we need to decide has happened, rather than expecting someone else to make us feel that we've reached closure. When we think about moving forward, resilience comes to mind, and kind of that perseverance to do it. And it may require the support of other people, so putting some thought into that. But remember, a positive reaction, as I kind of said earlier, doesn't necessarily mean happy rainbows and sunshine. It might just mean moving on. It might mean feeling neutral, getting to a place where you can feel neutral about something. It may mean taking action. It may be, I'm really frustrated about this injustice that I'm seeing, and I'm going to figure out a way to have a positive impact or have a positive influence on the situation and help good change happen. Sometimes it might just be, hey, I didn't have a really bad interaction with that coworker. We just had a neutral interaction. So it really is all relative. Really depending on the situation that you're experiencing. So I think that's important to keep in mind. But ultimately, it all does stem back to that choice that we started with at the beginning. When we focus on kind of things and outcomes that we can control, we end up, or outcomes that we can't control, we really can end up being disappointed and frustrated. So we do need to focus more on the choices that we can make, that we have control over. So I hope that, utilizing this process over time, is something that will help us develop those neural pathways that will allow us to more naturally react to life in positive ways, kind of right up front, that we may not need to go through the 3 Ps as much, or may not take us as long to go through them. But the 3 Ps can be a strategy that you can use in the moment when you need it. But I also, like to recognize that it can be helpful to have a few small ways that you can implement positivity kind of in your day-to-day when crisis isn't hitting or when a specific situation isn't happening. So I also wanted to offer kind of a few everyday positivity habits as well. These are listed on the handout as well, so I won't necessarily spend a ton of time on these, but these are all easy, low cost, pretty much no cost ways that you can kind of self-actualize more positivity in your life. And what's really fun is that a lot of them can be done with other people. So the first ones that are on the handout are actually from Sean Acor. He calls these his happiness habits, and these are actually the things that they implemented in their research. So like the example that I gave earlier of the 80-year-old man that was a part of their study that had kind of been born with a predisposition or lived his whole life to be negative. They had him for 2 minutes for 2 minutes a day for 21 days, they had him write down 3 things that he was grateful for. So he did the 3 gratitudes. And they saw his disposition and his mindset change from being negative to being more positive. So these are all just such easy, really simple ways.
And just, I know some people have been messaging. We know the GoToWebinar handout feature is being touchy. When we email out the recording link, we will also email the link to the handout. So don't worry if you're having trouble downloading it right now.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, John. A couple of other, just really basic things. So just basic, kindness and giving. So kind of helping others has been scientifically proven to boost your own mood and lengthen your lifespan. And it's really something that I think can take us outside of ourselves to focus on the needs of other people. So even just little things like holding a door for somebody, smiling, or, I think we often see that, oh, somebody maybe could use my help, but I'm in a hurry to get somewhere, or I've got my own to-do list. Give yourself that split second to think, is there a way that I could very easily help or offer a hand that will take 1 minute? And me being 1 minute late to that meeting won't be a big deal. So, just kind of taking some mental space to recognize those opportunities to be kind and to be giving that are really easy for us to breeze over. Savoring the small things. This may seem really, really simplistic and kind of corny, but, we do humans tend to perpetually kind of rush through life experiences, especially good ones. And so really learning to savor life, kind of those small life moments, are ultimately, I think, the things that kind of finding joy in the day-to-day is ultimately, I think, what makes us happy, not necessarily once in a while big things like a vacation. So the longer that something's held in your awareness, the more those kind of neurons fire for that experience, the more it's going to stick in your memory. So even just this morning when I was walking to my office, I saw this little squirrel like pouncing around on the lawn on campus. And I just took a minute to watch him and just get a kick out of like the way he was bouncing around and just find like some humor and joy. And this little animal that is so, it's everywhere. So it's really easy to overlook, but I just like chuckled to myself. And that was just a really positive way for me to be walking into my building this morning, and continue to get me excited about this webinar today. Spreading positivity too. So complimenting other people. I have a great coworker or colleague that really likes to catch people doing good things too. So either by mentioning it at a staff meeting or just shooting that person a quick email when she sees them doing something good or doing something well. So that's a really easy way to spread positivity and point things out to people. And the last thing that I'll mention as well, I think self-advocacy is really important too. I think it's really important to make sure we're taking time to recognize help that we may need, or speaking our truth, or when you do feel like you should get a raise, take a moment to obviously think strategically about that, but ask for what you want, because if there's things like that you just sit there ruminating, wishing would happen, but they aren't happening, it might be because you haven't given yourself the moment to think through, well, how could I ask for this? How could I make a case for this? And it doesn't necessarily mean that the outcome's always going to be what we want, which is when we maybe need to go back to the 3 Ps and effectively process what that outcome was. But we're never going to give ourselves the opportunity or the chance to have that good thing happen if we don't self-advocate for it too. So I think that's also really important. So if I was going to, kind of leave you with one final thought, I think it's important to recognize that positive people have negative thoughts too, and that, but it's really that we don't let those bad things rule our lives. So I hope you're taking away from this that I'm not saying that we need to pretend like bad things don't happen, but what really matters more is what we do as a result of them, and how we process them is what's really the important thing. And so I've given you some reflection questions to kind of help you think through this a little bit more. So I'd encourage you to even just think about what's one way you can take action to live a life that's maybe a little bit more positive. And there's a great saying that one of my friends from high school has in the bio on her Instagram account. It says, "You're always one decision away from a totally different life." And I totally agree with that, and believe in that philosophy. So as we kind of wrap things up, I definitely like to take some questions, but I'll just point out a couple of things. So I've got some different ways to contact me. I'd love if you'd follow along in the Positivist Explorer. I write about a lot of the things that I talked about today on there, but also a lot of other things. So if you want to continue to engage in that, I would love to have you follow along if you're on Instagram. I've also got my email address listed there. I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect. I'm also at a point where I'm starting to engage with people in kind of some small and some group settings and individually to kind of help with coaching folks or teams in this, kind of mindset as well. So that Z link that you see up there is one that you could visit just to fill out a quick little kind of form just to check if you'd be interested in some different types of opportunities or ways to connect that I'm kind of offering too. So feel free to check out that link and check any of those boxes and provide your contact information with me. I'm definitely not going to spam you, and I don't even necessarily know that I'll be following up in the super near future with some of those, but at least then I'll have your contact information if you are, and you can always opt out if you would just change your mind as well.
Sure.
Yeah. So with that said, I'd love to see if there are any questions or comments, things I might have missed to continue engaging. I think we've got a little bit of time.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes left, and if people have questions, feel free to type them in now in the questions pane of the GoToWebinar panel. The one thing I definitely appreciated is just kind of like, I think goes back to the pause part where just kind of thinking of the awareness of like, either why am I getting angry? Why am I, feeling negative about something?
Yeah.
I think sometimes like I've two boys, and it's like, so sometimes like when you're in those parenting moments, like for the adult, it's like, okay, here's the, take that pause, take that time out. Is the Lego on the floor for the 700th time? Is this worth like ruining my evening or things like that? And so I appreciate that.
Yeah, so. I feel like I actually had a moment of pause this morning. I got coffee with one of my good friends and she was asking me about the talk, the talk coming up and how I was feeling about it. And I started rattling off all these things I hoped wouldn't happen. Like I would fumble over my words and all these things. And she, just from some experiences she's had, she said, I've really come to learn that that's our natural inclination is to at first focus on the things we hope won't happen. Sure. But we need to start thinking more about what we hope will happen, because that's how we kind of self-actualize that. So she's like, so just start thinking more about how you want things to go and how you want to present this content. And that was a huge mindset shift for me. So you know who you are out there. That helped me in that respect. So I think that connects to that pause. I do see that we had a question that came in. So let's see here. What are the tactics or recommendations for encouraging students to leverage positivity when they're experiencing stress or disappointment? Ooh, yeah, that's a really good question. So I do think that moment of pause is important. I do think it's important to just say, hey, it's okay for you to be stressed right now. It's okay to feel that disappointment. And then start to focus on how are we going to process that though? What are we going to, what are we going to do as a result of that? Which may mean we need to maybe even focus on what kind of self-talk is that person happening, or what sort of choices or options are available that maybe we haven't taken time to recognize yet. What resources could we utilize? Is there maybe a different path that we could try? So start to look at those other opportunities that maybe we haven't been taking time to recognize yet, and then kind of take it from there. But it's definitely important to let them know, to let them know, it's okay to feel stressed and to feel disappointment. That's normal for whatever it may be that they're experiencing, but then it's important to, figure out how we're going to move past that. Let's see, somebody else said, I found it very difficult to leverage positivity in a stressful mindset. Any ideas on how to be able to do that? Again, it really stems back to that pause. I think, recognizing I'm stressed out about this, maybe starting to put a little bit of thought into what's specifically stressing you out or why you're feeling stressed about the situation. So again, my story I shared from this morning, that I was starting to feel kind of stressed out, nervous, and anxious about this talk, because I'm so excited about it. And that conversation helped me realize that maybe I was feeling that stress because I was kind of focusing on the wrong things, and that I needed to kind of flip it. So sometimes I maybe even think about, okay, well, what is stressing me, and kind of how am I viewing this right now? What if I were just to, kind of be out there and think about what if it was the opposite? What if I think about this in the total opposite way? And maybe that's not the way it's going to end up going, but just, you need to give yourself the chance, you need to give yourself the opportunity to even consider that there's a different way to feel about things. There's a different way to approach things. And that might start to help you move beyond that stress. Let's see, how do you approach building positive collaborative relationships at work? Yeah, so one, I think, is just living it, yourself. As I talked, that kind of concept that I talked about earlier with the mirror neurons, so to bring that science back, is I think that is really the concept that allows both negativity and positivity to spread in one way or another. So I think if you're kind of living it, hopefully it will also, you'll be able to have a positive impact on other people. But then I think just thinking about, even as we think about positivity being a practice, what are some practices that you can bring to your team? So can you do like a random acts of kindness day? Or can you, one of my favorite things to do is I like to write little positive or fun like sayings or quotes on Post-it notes and like write them, like post them around campus. I have a colleague that started an initiative in our office where we have kind of like some printed out slips of paper with just like some compliments on them, like you're so great to work with, or I really appreciate the work you do. And you can slip them on people's mailboxes and they don't know who they're getting it from, but it's just like a fun little feel-good thing. So there's lots of fun ideas like that. And I mean, and this is the sort of question that, depending on what your team looks like, the makeup of your team, there may be different things that would work in your context. So those are the sorts of things I'm really excited about talking with people about more. So yeah, let's see, another question. How do we become leaders of positivity in our workplace and help improve workplace culture? I think that really kind of ties into kind of that last question I had. Let's see. Yeah, this is a good one. How do we deal with a collaborator who doesn't necessarily care about the project, but you have to stay positive? Yeah, I think this is one of those situations where, as we talk about that that process phase, I mean, first, it's okay to be frustrated in this situation individually, but as you kind of move forward to processing it and trying to evaluate, the problem-solving approach to it, where that empathy piece may be really important, and it may be really important to, I don't want to say necessarily give them the benefit of the doubt, because we don't want to excuse their behavior necessarily, but we may want to think a little bit about where are they coming from, or why may they not care about it, and maybe even provide the opportunity to have a conversation about it. And definitely not confrontational, but maybe just have a conversation with the collaborator about, what are the aspects of the project that need to be completed, what are the things that they maybe would be interested, the aspects that they would be more interested in engaging in, or the skills that maybe they would like to utilize in collaborating on the project. So, open that door for a conversation so that you can have a little more understanding about where they're coming from, and how, you know, that understanding may allow you to collaborate in more effective ways. So kind of getting outside yourself and your own frustration about the situation to understand where they may be coming from as well. So yeah, somebody shared, I have found the resources on positive organizational scholarship to be very important for leaders. Awesome. Yeah.
And I think you're so right as far as like, I think, and I can only speak for myself, but when you kind of take that time to kind of look internally or take those moments to pause, that then, you know, whether it's working with a coworker, a spouse, a supervisor, whatever, you're maybe a little bit more attuned to kind of just what's going, you know, what, you know, like you said, they could just be having a really bad day, or maybe they're really hot about a work project, but really, you know, through listening and other things, you find out it's about, you know, their dog is dying or something, you know, something like that, and just trying to be, I mean, it's not a 100% solution, but so many times it seems like what seems to be like the cause, there's something else.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Or it may just even be that you care about it more. So like you mentioned your spouse. So one of the things my husband does is he leaves like shoes all over in our entryway, and I always feel like I can't get the door open from the garage, you know, and it's really easy. It could be really easy for me to be walk in the door and immediately be like, oh honey, you left your shoes out again. But it's just like I care more about it than he does, and it's like it's okay that he doesn't care about it as much. Like I can acknowledge it if I'm frustrated and you know can communicate that to him, but like I also have behaviors and things that I do that frustrate him. So you know, it's always a two-way street. So I think it's important to recognize that as well. So yeah, so thanks so much for the opportunity. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm excited about any of you that may want to connect more in the future as well.
Yeah, well, definitely reach out to Whitney. I just followed her on Instagram. So
thanks, John.
And then she's on LinkedIn as well. So really appreciate everybody tuning in today. Just last housekeeping items. Thanks again to our webinar supporting sponsor, Liberty Mutual Insurance. And thank you to all the alumni, students, and friends of the University of Minnesota who joined us today. And thank you again to Alumni Association members who in part make initiatives like this possible. I hope everyone's having a good day. It's raining here in the Twin Cities. So hopefully, but it's not snowing. So, hey let's be positive about that.
That means the grass is going to green up, the snow's going to disappear.
So, for those of you still on, Whitney and I were talking about on Northrop Mall yesterday, there was sun seekers in the sun. It was nice and 66, but we still had some piles of snow still melting. So, hey,
snow boulders.
Minnesota. So, thank you again to everyone tuning in today, and we'll see you soon.